Rejoice, toaster boys, for you've gotten some love. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, with the latest installment of 40k's decades-long saga, it is everyone's favorite tech-loving boys who are placed at the front and center, fighting against the equally metal Iron Warriors. And with the reveals, we got a brand new model and a brand new unit, with Archmagos Dominus Thalia Gould, leaving the new chunky lads of the Adeptus Mechanicus, that being the Hastarii. And everybody is quite digging the new buff Hastarii, with very little complaints. Although, if you were to say something, they probably shouldn't be called Hastarii, because the Hastarii in reference to history were actually skirmishers for the Spartans, and then Hastarii means like the lighter Roman infantry. So these guys should be Trincape, not really like Triari, because those are like elites. I guess those would be Titan God. This has absolutely fucking nothing to do with the video. What the fuck am I on? Anyway, history nonsense aside, people quite like the new Hastarii, both how they look, but also some of their rules, which in both cases, they're looking pretty Space Marine-y. Not only how they work on the tabletop, but the actual models themselves are said to be relatively in size with Space Marines. Or, you know, something like that. And then this led to many people talking about the Admech getting Space Marine-like profiles and Space Marine-like units, which then further leads into the discussion, is Warhammer 40k the game system slowly dying out because every single army seems to have some type of Space Marine alternative? Or is it the case that 40k fans just like big, thick, armored men? Me myself personally, I tend to swing towards the latter rather than the former. Wait. What? Fuck! Look man, when it comes to 40k, you have two options. Big, thick, dommy daddy, world eater butcher, or tsundere femboy Hastarii. Hey, that's how it is, brother. I don't make the rules. Cause you bet your sweet pippy if I did, there would be a thick-thighed LGF right up there. Come to papa! But whatever the fuck that was aside, people were very excited to get heavy Hastarii, with many of them kind of being glad you'd be introducing something new to 40k. But that's the thing, it's not really new. And ladies and gentlemen, we finally get to the topic of today's video, with us being like, what, 3 minutes in already? God damn, I got problems. Because way back when in the days of Horus Heresy, and still in the modern day of 40k, the Admech have their own versions of Space Marines. And those, ladies and gentlemen, are none other than the Thallax cohorts of the Ordo Reductor. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let us take a look at the cybernetic War-Borgs of the Bringers of the Blessed Rain. First thing first, what is a Thallax? A Thallax is a Hastarii that has been surgically implanted into the Lorica Thallax, aka the Adeptus Mechanicus versions of Space Marine power armor. No, like literally, they're sister systems. And they're basically the Astartes of the Adeptus Mechanicus, used mainly by the Ordo Reductor. But to truly understand the purpose of the Thallax and why they're so cool and kinda fucked up, we gotta understand the Ordo Reductor. The Ordo Reductor, or the Bringers of the Blessed Rain, or my personal favorite title, the Bringers of the Blessed Ruin, are a subvariant of the Adeptus Mechanicus cult. You see, the machine god is said to inhabit many different forms. He is the cold calculating ferocity of machine math, but he's also the warm understanding kindle of discovering new technology and preserving human understanding. And one of these many forms is the Bringer of Ruin, the Unmaker, destruction made manifest. Essentially, blowing shit all the way the fuck up. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the shit that the Ordo Reductor signed up for. These are the avatars of the Unmaker God. They are all about destroying anything and everything. You need something blown the fuck up? You call the Ordo Reductor. But instead of me waffling on about how much I love these guys, because these are my favorite subfaction of the Admech in Horus Heresy, let us lean on existing wisdom. Taken from Horus Heresy, Book 5. Known to their fellow adherents in the machine cult as the Bringers of Blessed Rain, the Ordo Reductor is a distinct and highly specialized military division of the Mechanicum. Theirs is the sacred role of Unmaker, Slaughterer, and Breaker. They embody the animus of the Omnissiah, its duality not as creator or embodiment of knowledge, but as destroyer and bringer of oblivion. The given title, whose prefix was unusual for the servants of the Mechanicum, was invoked first by the great treaty between the Lords of Mars and the Emperor of Humanity, although their true and forgotten origins delve back into the dust and blood of the Age of Strife on the red world of their birth. By this order, a subclass of the very compact by which the alliance between the Mechanicum and Terra was sealed, was the Ordo Reductor created for the express purpose of sundering and destroying those who would stand against the Great Crusade. Where a new and terrible alien form of life was encountered that would not succumb to the Imperium's panoply of war, it would be the biologists of the Ordo Reductor who would find a way to kill it. Where a recalcitrant human techno-empire stood strong against the Great Crusade fleets, it would be the preceptors of the Ordo Reductor who observed and analyzed their weapons and defenses to find their weakness, and most famously, where a fortress stood seemingly impregnable, it would be the Ordo Reductor who would find a way to bring it low. The Ordo Reductor's numbers, however, were always relatively few, accounting for only a handful of the most bellicose of the Magos of Mars in the beginning, split from their forges and domains, henceforth to serve the Great Crusade first, and the feudal masters of the Mechanicum second in all things. Even as other Forge Worlds were contacted and brought into the fold, their numbers did not increase greatly, and it is often said, and not without evidence, that those tech priests and Magos given up to the Ordo Reductor by their birth worlds, or who were drawn to it of their own volition, were already seen as outcasts, either dangerously heretical in their learnings, or overly independent, and perhaps psychologically unstable by their peers. However, within the fold of the Ordo Reductor were such individuals redeemed in the doctrine of the cult of the Omnissiah, and given righteous purpose in the service of the Mechanicum, as well as removed largely from the feudal politics of the Forge Worlds. And so while they became other to those who remained directly under the shadow of Mars, they were not considered with the same levels of suspicion and often distrust as followed that parallel Mechanicum faction, which also shared the battlefields of the Great Crusade with them, the Legio Cybernetica. The Ordo Reductor. As I said, my favorite subfaction of the Mechanicum in 30k because of one unit in particular, that being the Myrmidon Secutors, aka the Warrior Priests of Mars. I love these guys. They are like my favorite unit ever in the Mechanicum because they're big, chunky, they look amazing. And I know that they got themselves new models in like the Horus Heresy, but we got their range variant. I'm waiting for the melee variant. Please give me the melee variant. Having 4 arms and 2 of them being giant Volkov cannons and then a big chunky axe as well. Also, the whole helmeted cloaked nonsense is just so quality. It's so good. Also, they're really fucking good on tabletop. Like, I didn't know how good they were, but it turns out, oh my god, with the plasma fusils, Jesus saves, they are quality. But the Ordo Reductor is not just the Myrmidons. Now, they are the main point there, and as to kind of relate it to how these guys are to the other Mechanicum and compare them, these guys are basically like the Black Templars. Like, these are religious even for the Mechanicum, but they're like warrior religious. They're like death, destruction, and very bellicose. Yet, of course, they're actually more measured than the Black Templars because the Black Templars are batshit crazy. But the whole way that the Adeptus Mechanicus looks at the Myrmidons and the Ordo Reductor is kind of the same way how other Space Marines look at the Black Templars in a sense. They're good at what they do, but goddamn some of the shit they do is fucking weird. And that goes for all of the Ordo Reductor, including the topic of today's video, that being the Lorica Thallax and the Thallaxi cohort. Again, we're like however minutes into the video and now we're talking about, look, I am a man who pays taxes and has a cat. Do with that information what you will. Okay, the Thallaxi cohort were created for the Ordo Reductor, and their origins go all the way back to the Age of Strife with the birth of the Red Planet and the Red Priest, etc. Essentially, what we see right now is the Lorica Thallax. Basically, a Hastarii, whether they're gravely wounded or they choose to be elevated one way or another, their insides are basically implanted into there. It's their spine, their brain, their nervous system, I think, and maybe 1 or 2 other vital organs. Imagine RoboCop type shit. And then they're plugged in there. And this is literally a powered armor. In fact, the powered armor that the Space Marines wear and this are sister systems. They share some origin. And these guys were made famous for being the equivalent of Space Marines. No, literally, in lore, they were able to fight with Space Marines one-on-one on relatively equal footing. Because they weren't tech thralls in a sense, they were Hastarii, but like an advanced Hastarii. So they can think and they can understand, and they can function like normal human beings. But because of the Adeptus Mechanicus, they would get kind of fucked up. But instead of me just regurgitating it to you, how about we hear it straight from the horse's mouth? Taken from Horus Heresy Book 1 and Book 2. The heavily augmented cyborg shock troops of the Ordo Reductor faction of the Mechanicum, the Thallax differed from the Hastarii regiments, both in their purpose, and the unique degree of their augmetics. The Lorica Thallax which encases them was developed from the same power armor technology which led to the development of the Legiones Astartes battle plate, but taken in an entirely different avenue of development. The Lorica encases the major organs, nervous system, and cerebrum, but replace the skeleton and limbs entirely with armored mechanical systems powered by an internal reactor core. The agony of this process, along with the replacement of the usual human sensory apparatus, proved so traumatic as to require the surgical excision of pain centers and emotions, leaving the Thallax a cold, calculating killing machine, yet one that still retains a degree of independent human thought. Although for some within the Mechanicum, this skirts the edge of abomination, given the resources required, the difficulty of creating a Thallax, and the fact that an individual's will to live is a factor in whether a usable measure of sanity is retained in the subject. Thallax conversion is often reserved for suitable Forge Guard and Scutari fallen in battle, and subjects obtained from more mysterious sources by the unfathomable and baleful Ordo Reductor. A divergent form of power armor technology, the Lorica Thallax, unlike its Space Marine counterparts, is permanently surgically bonded to the body of the wearer. It uses linked Mechanicum armatures to replace the primary limbs, and a compact reactor core to generate power for the Thallax's weaponry. The armor is fused directly to the spinal column and the nervous system of the Thallax, and marks them both as warriors of the Mechanicum, and serves as a symbol of their servitude. The sinister, blank-faced helms of the Thallaxi conceal an array of inhuman sensory apparatus, through which they experience the battlefield as a raging storm of electromagnetic turmoil, blood, heat, and seismic percussion. However, for the organic brain to handle this hurricane of data, it must be surgically mutilated, removing the mere human senses, such as sight and hearing, replacing them with the so-called Jinn sight. Designed to operate in the most lethal and hazardous theaters of war, the design of the Thallax is arguably a bridging point between the more commonplace heavy combat servitors and the augmented human Scutari of the Forged Legions. The particular augmentations undergone by one of the Thallax are both severe and extreme, retaining only the brain, and in many cases the skull and spinal column, the life-sustaining viscera, and the nervous system as the basis of the articulated and armored robotic frame which encompasses it. Other principal features of the design include a high-energy compact reactor system, those whose emanations could not be endured by a less augmented organic, allowing for extremely potent portable weaponry to be utilized, an arcane implanted sensory apparatus operating outside the usual realm of organic perception. The unfortunate side effects of these systems on the living components, however, are continuous agony and psychotic breakdowns, effects elaborated by the surgical excision of some of the brain's emotional centers. The resulting machine creature is capable of a far greater tactical flexibility and independent action than a mere servitor, though terminal deterioration of the subject's psyche is certain over extended periods of time. The armored chassis and life support systems of the Lorica Thallax share many technologies underpinning and common components with the early patterns of Legiones Astartes power armor, and are both extremely adaptable and highly durable. This provides great strength and durability for the Thallax on the battlefield, and allowed for a beneficial degree of cross-supply between the legions and the Ordo Reductor during the Great Crusade. Ladies and gentlemen, the Lorica Thallax and the Thallaxi cohort. Continuing the trend of elites in 40k being both badass and really not worth it if you think about it. And you thought Space Marines were bad. With the Space Marine, your dick don't work. With the Thallax, they just straight up remove that shit altogether. But the Thallax cohort are a very important part of the Mechanicum, and they fit a nice good niche. Because whilst the Magos of the Ordo Reductor are a minute order, the Thallax were quite ubiquitous, with every single major legion having some type of Thallax with them. As of course they had some type of Mechanicum with them, so much so that Adeptus Mechanicus cohorts of Thallaxi would often take legion heraldry. These were especially common with legions that were very much so into technology, such as the Iron Warriors, Iron Hands, and Salamanders. Though again, pretty much every single legion had at least one cohort of Thallaxi that were aligned to them. But being a Thallaxi is one of those things that either you get chosen, very rarely, or in some other cases, you get servitorized syndrome, because when they say by unfathomable means, they're pretty sure that they just plucked a really good army guy from the Astra Militarum, well, the Imperial Army, not called the Astra Militarum yet, and just, silently chucked him into there, because that sounds like something the Admech would do. But on the topic of that, it really did depend from ForgeWorld to ForgeWorld how bad it was. we have accounts of some Forge Worlds trying to lessen the strain on the psyche, trying to make the Jinn sight, by the way, excellent name, a little more natural by trying routing it through the noosphere. But then we get other cases of Magos who literally treat these Thallaxi like their servitors, exerting their full-on independent control on them, which are not really supposed to do. But, you know, the Mechanicus in 30k did whatever the hell they want. Like, you thought the Mechanicus did whatever they want in 40k? Nah, son, 30k Mechanicum was different. But regardless of how they were treated by the Magos, they're all armed relatively the same way. The primary weapon was one of my favorite things in all of 40k, that being the lightning gun. The lightning gun is exactly what it sounds like. It is a gun that shoots electricity, and it has two primary modes. You have so-called a chain mode, which allows it to go zippy-zappy all over and fry whatever helpless creatures in front of it, usually human beings, or mutants, but are mutants really humans? Or a so-called strike mode, or how I like to refer it, a bolt mode, because it literally throws a massive fuck-off bolt of lightning, potent enough to breach power armor. At least, you know, according to the tabletop that is, but that's neither here nor there. These weapons were used to deadly effect. Essentially, the Magos leading them would give them commands to switch either bolt or chain, and they would walk forward without any fear, without any worry. These were truly fearless warriors, much like the Adeptus Astartes in that sense. They would advance and advance and advance. If anything so much as looked at them wrong, you get a whole cohort worth of lightning coming right at you. And if you got close, they were often equipped with chain bayonets or heavy chain swords. And then of course, their fists were literally Space Marine fists, so yeah, goodbye head. These were not the only weapons they carried, as due to their girth they were able to carry some very heavy weaponry, including heavy plasma fusers, multi-lasers, las cannons, basically anything that like a tank could carry, these guys could carry too. If you had to make the Space Marine comparison, I guess you could imagine them kind of like tactical squads in a sense, or I think more like Devastator squads would be a little bit like a combo between Devastators and Tacticals, I guess. But they were incredibly effective, and as I mentioned earlier, they garnered respect from the Space Marine legions because they acted like Space Marines. Space Marines were meant to be the hammer that broke the enemy. If the normal Scutari couldn't cut the mustard, if the Tech Thralls couldn't cut the mustard, that's when you deployed the Thallaxi, big armored wall, marching forward, free of fear, inhibitions, and emotion. They were ruthless killing machines, destroying and slaughtering any and all in their wake, because these were the personification of the Tagmata of the Omnissiah, but not the Omnissiah as the creator, but the Omnissiah as the unmaker. And behold now his servants, clad in iron with demon vision, wielding the lightning of heaven, and woe betide any who would come across them. Now, some of you may be thinking, oh, just outrun them. Super simple, right? They're big, they're slow, long range, just outrun them and flank them. And normally that would be a good idea. Except the Thallaxi are not the only version of these guys. Cause just like you got yourselves good old-fashioned tactical squads and assault squads, you got Thallaxi cohort and the Ursarax cohort. And these guys are something different, son. Taken from the Horus Heresy, Book 3. A later development of the Great Crusade, the Ursarax Tech Thralls were first designed by the explorator Magos, Arben Falcon, as a heavy, rapid-moving, close combat unit, for use by the notoriously independent Magos' force, using a fusion of existing technologies sacred to the Mechanicum, materials and patterns taken from the Thallax of the Ordo Reductor, much to their displeasure, and the fruits of Falcon's own discoveries of formidable, even monstrous killing engines. Like the Thallax, they are thralls rather than servitors, selected from suitable human candidates for conversion, so the living components retain a consciousness and dim recollection of their former humanity, providing them with superior tactical abilities and the instincts to kill. Neural anesthesia is automatically administered for the successful fulfillment of their orders, providing them with relief, albeit temporarily, from their tortured existences. After Falcon's mysterious disappearance, his warring acolytes dispersed to many different masters, taking the secrets of the Ursarax's creation with them. A powerful, purpose-designed Volkite ray weapon is mounted in the chest unit of each Ursarax, allowing it to both attack its victims at range with lethal Volkite beams. Also, more unorthodoxly, by grabbing its foe with its claws and dragging them in to suffer by the full brunt of the discharge at point-blank range. This confined ray blast is particularly devastating in its power, and is able to render even heavily armored warriors to cinders in mere moments. Ah yes, the Ursarax. As mentioned in the excerpt above, they are armed with a Volkite beam weapon, known as a Volkite incinerator, which is kind of like a cross between a Volkite culverin, like used on armor, and then like the heavy Volkite caliber used by a legionary devastator squad. It's kind of like an in-between type thing. It is also armed with usually lightning claws, or power fist, one of the two, and a jump pack. And this thing, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly what it says on the box. It is big, it is heavy, it is mean, it is angry, and it moves fast. This is a close quarters combat variant of the Thallax, in every single sense of the word. It is able to rip and tear until the job is done and there is nothing left. Also, interestingly enough, where Thallax are all about ruthlessness in a cold, calculating manner, because of the sort of unstable nature of the Ursarax, also with the whole pain-numbing effect and the nature of close quarters melee combat, it's been noted that the Ursarax tend to be a little bit more frenzy in their movements. Whereas a regular Thallax will just kill you outright, an Ursarax will probably take a more bloody approach. It's known that when they fight, in some cases they can enter in these crazy near berserk-like rages. Although this has never ever been confirmed, because it's very hard to tell the difference between what is their own independent thought versus whatever their Magos is telling them to do. But you know, going on my own opinion here, I think it makes sense. Melee dudes, blender dudes, very fucking crazy, very fucking wild. I mean, it makes sense he'd be a little fucked up in the head, you know? But hey, that's just me. But regardless of whether you like the Thallax or the Ursarax, both of them were an incredibly vital part of the Mechanicum. But not only the Mechanicum, but the wider Imperium. The Ordo Reductor as a whole was created to deal with anything that the Imperium couldn't handle, and thus, I believe that the Thallax and the Ursarax are a symbol of that. The Ordo Reductor was essentially a symbol of the union between Earth and Mars. Earth and Mars are very separate in today's 40k, but back in the day the lines were a lot more blurry. In Warhammer 30k, the Mechanicum whole setup was different. Individual Tagmata held loyalties to their own planet first and foremost. Whilst the Mechanicum was united by ideology, it was not united politically by any stretch of the imagination. Everyone did their own thing, and everyone had it out for their own ways. Big E knew this. And he knew that if he wanted a reliable Mechanicum source, he had to bake it right then and there in the details. Same reason that's how he got his 30 Titans to make the Ordo sinister. Thus the Ordo Reductor is the Emperor guaranteeing that the Imperium will always have some Mechanicum support. Essentially, they're a blending of the two. And so are the Thallax. The Thallax is basically an Adeptus Mechanicus version of a Space Marine in every single sense of the word. They are regular human beings taken and elevated, although far more gruesomely, mind you. They are fearless, foreboding, dangerous, and just like the legions, when the heresy happened they were sundered. Just as many served loyalists as they did heretics. And despite them being incredibly cold and ruthless, or crazy and mad in the case of the Ursarax, they were still humans at the end of the day. They could think, they could talk. How much they did and how much leeway they were given by the masters depends from ForgeWorld to ForgeWorld, but the point is this: they were not mindless thralls. They were not mind-wiped servitors, they were human. At the very core of it all, they were human. So too were the Space Marines. A Thallax and a Space Marine fight was not only equal in terms of the physicality, rather it was much more equal in basically every other aspect. These were two superhumans, elevated into status of demigods, the will of their patron deity as the Unmaker, the Destroyer, the Sledgehammer, and they were pitted against one another. There was no quarter, there was no mercy, there was only to rend the opposing side into dust, because they stood against your God, against your chosen Omnissiah. It was a human who believed in one thing versus a human who believed in another. In some cases it was a brother against a brother, and that's very important. Because just as much the Horus heresy was Imperium versus Imperium, it was also Imperium versus Adeptus Mechanicus. It was humanity versus humanity. It was human beings fighting ourselves. And just as there is the twin union of Mars and Terra, so too was the twin demigods to protect them, being the Adeptus Astartes and the Thallaxi cohort. And it's no small wonder then that when these two foes met, whole worlds were rent asunder in the wake of their ruin. And that is why I love Thallaxi. They are space marines for the Adeptus Mechanicus, not only in literally how they fight, how they work the tabletop, but in every single aspect. Also, they're just really cool. But as I said, I could talk on and on and on and on and on and on and on, but rather, how about I give you a first glimpse appearance of not only the Lorica Thallax at work, but also the Ordo Reductor as a whole. Starring with everyone's favorite beloved Primaris maker himself, Mr. Belisarius Cole. You know, Gilliman has a lot of funny nicknames. How come Cole doesn't have any? Mr. Bellywog Ball. Let me hear some in the comments. But that comes at the end of the video. But right now, let's take a look at Horus Heresy, Wolf's Bane. The broad beams of lightning gunfire cracked the air with sudden heat-driven displacement, shaking the storage cavern with unnatural thunder. A cohort of Thallaxi stalked past guns flashing their consequent arcs of death. Trilisi and A4 subterranean agrifields could not fall. If the world died, their main food supply would be lost, and they would be starved out. The fighting began there against groups of Traitor Legion infiltrators, seeking to end the campaign before it began. They had been spotted. Battle commenced. Naturally, the Magos Domina directed the fight from a fortress realm within the scepter station of the Heptagonion. Only her lucky underlings got to experience the thrill of combat. That is how she had put it to Cole. Had his sense of self-preservation not intervened, he would have begged to differ. The legionaries opposing them wore blue. Night Lords are Alpha Legion. Cole could not tell through the smoke. The signal pulse of their Iden beacons was corrupted. Imperial codes had been replaced by identifiers of the enemy. The smoke shrouded everything further than 5 meters away. Ruptured oxygen pipes quickened fires enough to make them burn steel. The stink of hot metal was overpowering. Cole's senses bleeped out a cacophonous din of alarms that stressed the spaces of his mind. Gas, fire, bullets, explosions. So many ways to die. And the coterie of minor machine spirits bounded to his mind. Were only too eager to tell him all about them. His Thallaxi advanced, methodically spraying the hall end with their weapons. Energy discharge of myriad sorts provided a colorful display. Phased plasma bursts and overcharged photons competed to see which could blaze the brightest. Las fire sped in short, straight lines. Artificial lightning zigged and zagged. A hexagonal crate of soil exploded. He saw a legionary go down, the gaping hole in his chest plate lined with the glow of molten ceramite. Another fell, drilled in 3 different places by the indigo beams of a multi-laser. Mass reactives blew all over the frontal casing of one of the Thallaxi. It staggered, sinking lower on its knees. Gas sprayed from a severed tube. Cole thought it would fall, but it paused as it rerouted function away from damaged components. Then it lumbered on. The slight limp it now suffered, hindering it not at all. The legionaries fell back like ghosts. The Thallaxi plodded on, weapons swinging on their gimbals as they tracked, locked onto and assessed everything that might pose a threat. A moment's relative quiet fell. Alarms wailed all over the facility. Decompression winds surged violently and died as breaches in the agri-caverns were made, and bulkheads sealed against them. Cole risked poking his head around the fallen utility column he cowered behind. He gripped his Volkite Serpentia so tightly his fingers ached. He had not fired a single shot. An oxygen pipe overhead roared like a flamethrower. Cole risked accessing the infosphere to hunt out and command protocols and shut it off. He found it. Like an extinguished candle, the pipe went out. The wall opposite was blackened for meters around. At least now he felt he had done something useful. The Thallaxi paused 10 meters away. Cole had a minor pick view in his third eye run a text screen eavesdrop on their conversation. The communications were terse, to the point, and exclusively concerned with killing. Their next course of action agreed. They advanced again. Cole swallowed. He was assigned to support them. He would have to follow. He did not want to. He was too unaccustomed to the armor he wore. The weight of the servo harness mounted on his back was supported by suspensors, but the mass upset his gait, and he was forced to move oddly, ridiculously, to keep up with the shock troops. Charming more insistent than threat indicators announced incoming communication. Hesta Aspirata Sigma Sigma's mirrored visage imposed itself over his field of vision.
"Cole,"
she said.
"nothing like battle, is there?"
She was gloating. No doubt she could read his discomfort through her battle omnispecs. He was subordinate to her, and no one that served Sigma Sigma was beyond her oversight. He imagined his craven heartbeat racing across the room displays and attempted to quell his fear.
The enemy have fallen back,
he said.
The Ordo Reductor Tagma serving here is a fine one,
she said.
But the war goes ill elsewhere. The heptagonal stands, but the extraction station at Tricylon A3 has already fallen. The enemy will be sending reinforcements from there.
What should I do? He said.
Attend to the fallen. Fight, she said. I have much to deal with.
Her face vanished from his third eye. A squeal of treads on metal grabbed his attention. Smoke curled around the fast-moving tank, festooned with weaponry.
Legionary Sakaran Destroyer Tank! Sector 2!
Carl Vox blurted. He ducked as it opened fire. The Thallaxi were incapable of fear, and therefore evidenced a more heroic reaction than Carl, and immediately returned fire. Unlike the Legionary's battle plate, the tank's hide was proof against their weaponry. Earthing sparks fizzed from its hull. Plasma carved molten slashes into its glacis. But it accelerated towards the cyborg, spewing laser beams. A Thallax at the far end of the line spouted magnesium-white fire from its blank faceplate. It fell to its knees and climbed to the floor face down. Its organics reduced to greasy smoke. A second lost an arm to the last beam. The limb spun in the air and clattered off the wall where Carl hid. He cringed at the noise.
Armored Assault! Sector 2!
He shouted. He sent out a data burst and activated his locator beacon at full strength, not caring who might lock onto it. The Thallaxi parted to allow the tank through. It caught one a glancing blow in the leg as it passed, knocking the cyborg down. Stabbing fires flickered into the tank's weaker rear armor. It locked its tracks, skidding to a halt right by Carl's hiding place. It bore the dark blue heraldry of the Night Lords and was covered in chains dangling bones and bloody scraps that had recently adorned living bodies. The track spun in the opposite directions, pivoting the tank on the spot to face the dwindling number of cyborg troops. Carl hunkered down, praying to the Omnissiah that he would not be detected. He came close to giving away his position with a joyous emission of data when a short, pointed message wrote itself across his internal displays. Help is at hand. A red marker blinked into being on his cartograph. Reinforcements moved slowly towards a canopy gallery overlooking the cavern, chanting the doleful, single digit of death.
0, 0, 0, 0.
A coven of Myrmidon destructors moved in to attack. They were massive things, belligerent grotesques humming with power, fanatic technicae who had given their bodies entirely over to augmentation. The Thallaxi they came to support had the uniformity of manufacturer-produced units and appeared inhuman. Not so the Myrmidons. The Myrmidons were architects of their own enhancement, and so they were blessed with the potency the machine god provides to he who works his own will upon his own form. Little more flesh remained to them than it did to the Thallaxi, but they appeared more human for their ugliness. One a polished skull, most likely the warrior's original, jutted out a steel cable neck from beneath hunched shoulders. His arms bore matched plasma cannons. Eyes of red glass swept the battlefield with thin lines of raging lasers. The front of another dangled a pair of flesh and blood arms, incongruously wired into a metal breastplate. All of them wore robes, though they did not need them. They were priests of the machine god as destroyer, horrific and potent with the motive force and reward for their devotion. Their stride was measured, slow to a revengeful pace by the burden of their inbuilt reactors and enormous weapons. The head swayed with ponderous motion. The Sakaran noticed them, and its turret rotated to bring the twin weapons to bear. Double pulses of las cannon fire tore up towards the canopy, catching it from beneath. Goblets of metal sprayed upwards. One of the Myrmidons was caught in the chest, rocked back by the explosive reaction of cohesive life contacting matter. The others repaid the favor. Carl's ears vibrated painfully to the building thrum of a conversion beamer powering to fire. A cumbersome, complex weapon to operate. In the hands of the Myrmidon lord who bore it, it reached its full deadly potential. Only one such as he had the internal space to mount dampeners required to stabilize the weapon correctly. The cranial implants to calculate the precise focal point for the beam reaction. The internal reactor to feed its massive hunger for power. Light gathered in the weapon exhaust vents.
On the side, Sergeant!
The Myrmidon blared through multiple vox emitters. A blinding shaft of energy burst from the weapon's blunt end and slammed into Sakharin's turret. This did not cause the damage. At a conversion beamer's focal point, matter underwent instantaneous conversion to energy. It was this that ripped away the turret with the force of a minor fusion reactor going critical. The detonation was deafening. Cole managed to pull himself behind his cover just in time to avoid being blinded by the accompanying afterflash and immolated by the fire of freed atoms. Pressure ripped at his robes. The explosions of electromagnetic pulse sent his implants haywire. For a moment, he lay stunned. Machine senses offline, human senses numbed. He pulled himself up with the help of his servo arms. The Sakharin was a blackened husk. The top half had been completely obliterated. The bottom half was cupped like a palm holding a guttering fire.
So perish all who turn the gifts of the machine god against the Omnissiah.
So intoned the Myrmidon Lord. I know this video is about the Thallax, but I fucking love the Myrmidon so fucking much. They're so cool. They're so epic. I love them. I wish there was more to them, but there really isn't. They're just big, bad, chunky motherfuckers who are like, fuck you in the name of the Omnissiah and the Machine God. As I said, they're basically Black Templars, but they're a little bit more like logical, reasonable, and sane. I think that's why I like them so much. I love the Black Templars, but they're a little too fucking crazy for my taste, because I'm like, they'll be doing something really cool, but then they'll do something really stupid. I'm like, oh, why'd you have to ruin it? But like the Myrmidons are the Black Templars, but not as fucking crazy. I just love them. I wish there was more. I wish there was so much more. They're so cool. I mean, I have literally nothing else to say because this would just be me ranting about how fucking cool they are, but God, I love them. I love them so fucking much, dude. Like, look at them. They're so cool. Okay, you know what? Nah, we're gonna go with their weapons because fuck you, that's why. So as I said, there are two main varieties, the Myrmidon Secutors and the Destructors. The Secutors are my favorite because they're the close quarters combat variant. They're armed with a great omniscient power axe. In addition, they have refractor fields. And in addition to that big fucking chunky axe, they can have either a Maxim bolter, essentially brute minigun bolt gun, a Volkite charger, a graviton gun, a rat cleanser, or the best weapon, the phase plasma fusel. Jesus Christ, this thing fucking slaps shit. And they got two of those just mounted on their fucking back. They're fucking like mental. And then you got the Myrmidon Destructors, which are essentially like the heavier versions. They also have a refractor field and a fucking power fist as well, so there are no slouches in melee, but they can have a Volkite Culverin, a Photon Thruster, an irradiation engine, a conversion beamer, or a graviton imploder. Their irradiation engine is essentially like a radiation fucking gun, cause fuck you. These are heavy weapons that they go on fucking tanks. The Volkite Culverin is the shit that the fucking Sakharin has, the one in the story that they fucking fucked up. This is just, I love them. I love them so much. My favorite unit, but yeah, I'm just gonna be ranting on if I continue. God, I need to like read a story. Let me know which story has Myrmidon Secutors, because I know like Wolfsbane has it, but is there like an Admech book that has purely that? Let me know down below. And I think that's gonna wrap us up, ladies and gents. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for watching. Let me know down below what you think of the Myrmidon Secutors, as well as the Ordo Reductor and the Thallaxi and the Hastarii and, you know, Space Marines as a whole. Would you agree with me that they're the perfect mirror to the Space Marines in every single aspect, not just physically and on the tabletop? Or do you just like them because they're big, thick, and chunky? And what do you think about the new Hastarii? Because they're essentially like the 40k version of the Thallaxi. Even though Thallaxi still exists in 40k, by the way. Remember, the Adeptus Mechanicus are not the Space Marine Legions. Most of the shit that the Admech had in 30k, they have some form of it in 40k because they're the Admech, that's the whole shtick. Of course, they don't have everything, but most of it, you know? I mean, it was in the Guy Haley 2013 Salamander book. Like, one of their tech priest dudes has a Thallaxi, and like, he fights like 5 black dragons, and you know, he dies, but like, he's able to wound like 2 of them pretty bad. I mean, 5 on 1, that's pretty solid numbers. But let me know down below about your thoughts. But I want to say a massive thank you to us for watching, but even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Shout out to my lieutenant tier members, Mr. Eddie V3 and Miss Majora of the Void. Shout out to my sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Bowen, Mr. Sean IRL7, Mr. Matthew Merrill, Mr. Sergeant Cossack, 68W173D, and Mr. That Guy. Shout out to my corporate tier members, Mr. Tremail the Math Kitty, Lord Rosarius, Tech Priest Toaster, Mr. Bowen, Shauna Smithers, The Gentle Salamander, The Wench of Warhammer, Major Doshinect, Edward King, and Mr. Overanalyze This. And finally, but absolutely not least, shout out to my private tier members, Mr. Thomas Moslance, Mr. Ivan_SBW, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Aeda, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Fortus Unum, Mr. CMD Nay, Mr. Eric Massaro, Mr. Dom Marek, Mr. Ken_Sakura333, Mr. Adrian Von Furen, Mr. Morally Bankrupt, Mr. Matthew Peter, Mr. Joshly1320, Mr. Adrax X1, Mr. Ethan Elam U71, Mr. Kiri Khan, Mr. Malpace-XB1XE, and Mr. Robert Makorovich. Thank you. I love you. I appreciate you. Sign up to the memberships to get a bunch of awesome benefits behind the scenes stuff, early access to these videos, and you get to get my love and support. But remember, it's always be free. So whether you give your boy $1 or not, I will love you just the same. Mwah! But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you so very much for watching. Let me know what you think down below. And I'm sure to say hello there, boys and girls. And I'll catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. Bella call me girl, Balonisaurus cruel, Bangosaurus colossy, Bella Legion corner, Bella sanguineus calling. Not gonna lie, these are kind of shit.